Hey. So, this is my personal progress report for Linux, number 2. So the things I want to talk about, I learned the importance of creating backups this week, because I'm on Manjaro, which is Arch, and people always said, hey, don't run the latest kernel, because it's always got bugs and everything, and it'll just break. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, that's fine. And then I saw online someone was like, hey, I'm getting like 10 more FPS in games on the latest kernel. You should totally do this too. And I'm an idiot, so I did. And it broke my NVIDIA driver. So then I had the joy of uninstalling my proprietary NVIDIA driver, installing the open source driver, because what it did was it broke the DPI scaling on my desktop. Everything was zoomed into like 500 times. So I had to switch drivers, which seemed to work. And then I switched back to the proprietary drivers, which fixed everything. Until I rebooted. And then when I rebooted, the login screen was borked. Like just completely ruined. And I would try to log in and it just wouldn't do. Luckily, that same day though, I followed a tutorial by Chris Titus, or Titus, however you pronounce his name. He's great. But he talked about the importance of setting up time shift for backups, especially on Arch. I just so happened to do that and ran one backup, or create one restore point, right before I did the thing that I did, which happened to be incidentally. I wasn't planning ahead. And so I was able to back up entirely to the old kernel by booting into the USB, safe bootable USB, and in downloading timeshift, opening timeshift, and restoring my drive back to the old kernel, which was just so stressful. It was the worst. But I learned now I create daily backups before I change anything. Just today, I wanted to try overclocking my GPU, because on Windows I have MSI Afterburner and it just works. I drag the slider to the right and I get better performance. It's that simple. And I downloaded Green with Envy. I was all ready to do it, and I had to edit my my X file, my .x, xorg.config, to add the ability to overclock. And I did that and rebooted, and it just wouldn't boot. It wouldn't display anything. So luckily I have daily restores now, and I just restored to today's one from earlier this morning, and it's completely fixed. I probably won't be overclocking because that just doesn't sound worth it. Ooh, that peaked. Let's not do that. Let's not peak when I laugh. Make it a little quieter. So let's switch to my desktop. Show you where I'm at right now. This is currently my main desktop. My other desktop has OBS and stuff on it. I'm not going to be showing that. I also followed a Chris Titus video where he talked about how to set up conky, and that's what I did. I took his little script his widget that he made, and changed it to my setting and everything. And I was worried about the IP address, and then I realized that it's not my public one, it's my local one, and so screw it, I'm not even gonna bother covering it up. I'm really proud of it. I think my desktop looks great. It's less jarring than my old desktop with the old wallpaper and stuff. And I got rid of the clock on the top title bar because I don't need 2 clocks on my desktop, and if something's covering up the desktop one, it's going to cover up the top one anyways, so screw it. I'm really proud of it. I feel like I'm finally getting to a point, aside from my issues with the startup and backups and stuff like that, where I'm really confident and comfortable with a lot of what I can do in Linux now. I'm not like an expert or anything, I'm still a noob, but I'm more comfortable editing files, and I'm more comfortable with the I mean, I've been fine with the terminal for a while, because this isn't my first time using Linux. I've been running a Ubuntu server for my Plex server and for game hosting for like 2 or 3 years now. So I'm kind of familiar with the terminal and everything. But this was my first time using it as my main like daily driver. And there was some hiccups so far. But I'm working through them, and since then, aside from when I break things and do what I'm not supposed to, it just works. There are a few things, like in Kden Live, I ran into an issue where the intro file, my intro.mkv that I made for tea time, it's only like 2 minutes long, but whenever I import it into Kden Live, it's like 3 hours long. And I'm working on that, trying to figure out how to fix that. And it's not the time thing, like what, it's weird. So it'll actually only have like 2 minutes of video, and then the last like 2 hours and 58 minutes will just be like a single screen. And it's super weird. And it's not the only thing that's done it. I've imported other videos that I've recorded myself for tea time and stuff, and it did the same thing. And this might even do it, I don't know. I gotta figure that out. Another problem I ran into was with my webcam. So let me switch back to it. You'll notice that each video I make, it looks completely different than every other video that I make. That's because the settings are all wonky. It doesn't like whatever the color space is, 4.2.2, like YVU12 or whatever stupid name it is. It just doesn't go well with it. It's like 5 FPS, and it's terrible. So I've been trying the different emulated settings, and I have this issue that I still can't fix where there's a lot of blurring in motion. A little motion is fine, like me talking, but again, like, this is just 1080p 30, so it shouldn't be blurring this bad, but it is. And I've been messing with the color settings, trying to get it closer to what I had on Windows, and I think I'm there, just about. I'm pretty happy with it with this current setup. I actually applied a LUT or LUT, whatever you'd call it, LUT, to my webcam in OBS, the same one I use for my video editing. So that'll be one less thing I have to do in the actual, Kden Live, which I like. Last thing I want to talk about, switching jarringly there. Great segue. No segue is the best segue. I've learned that lesson in life. I'm switching to wine staging instead of the default lutris staging, or lutris wine, for most games that I run through lutris now. And I've noticed about 10 to 15 more FPS switching to 6.2-2 staging, wine staging, as opposed to lutris 6.0. And it's pretty significant. I also had this issue in GTA where on lutris 6.0, my front two tires, whenever I would turn, would just go nuts. And switching to 6.2- the staging one, it completely fixed it. And I'm able to run on pretty much maxed out with just fine with the 1700X and a GTX 1070, which is about what I was doing on Windows. But I tried to play Ark. I don't recommend it on Linux. So the Linux native client is just awful. It looks like a PS2 game, and not in a good way, not a good PS2 game. And it's just so janky and bad, and it lags like a month behind the official release, so every time there's an update, you just can't log into servers. But you can play it through Proton, and with Proton version, it looks closer to Windows, and it runs fine enough, about as good as Windows does, which is good. But you can't log into official servers because Proton doesn't support anticheat, which sucks. And one of the mods I downloaded broke my Ark installation, and I don't know which one it is, so I'm gonna have to go through each of the mods that I use. And I haven't changed these mods in years. I use the same mods even on Windows. So one of those mods just doesn't like Proton or something, or maybe they're conflicting with the map I was trying to play. But every time it tries to boot, it stops responding, or not boot, every time it loads up and it gets to primal data, which is loading the engrams and stuff, I know what that is, but it always stops responding right there, and then it never starts responding. I've given it like 20 minutes and just let it do its thing. I didn't alt tab because I know that can also mess it up, and it just never got better. So Ark is a mess. Anti-cheat is really pissing me off because I wanted to play Vermintide 2. Can't. Wanted to play Black Desert now that they switched publishers. Can't. That's currently my biggest gripe with Linux, is that you can't use anti-cheat games unless you're playing a native Linux game. And that's just so frustrating. It's so close to being my ideal operating system or desktop environment or whatever, but it's just slightly off. If I could play my Oculus games, which will probably never happen because of Facebook, but if I could play my Oculus games and I could play games with anti-cheat and they just worked, this would be perfect. I would just never switch off of this. And I actually haven't switched to Windows since I've switched from it. I haven't loaded in for a single thing. And it's actually kind of freeing, knowing that like at any point in time I can hop in a USB and install any version of this I want, any distribution on any piece of hardware, and it'll probably just work. That's great. I'm genuinely loving Linux, and the community has been great. My first progress report is currently my best viewed video that I've done since I started doing videos again. And it's got comments, like 2 comments of people being like, hey, welcome to the community. I noticed you're using the terminal to launch your Epic games. You should use Heroic instead. And they weren't saying it in a mean way either. Like, you know, in various other communities, it might be like, oh, you're stupid. You shouldn't do this. You're bad. You shouldn't do this. Not in that nice of verbiage, but they were like, no, actually, this is a better way. You could try it. And that's great. And I'm super appreciative of how the community has been so far. And I'm going to stick around for at least a little while, you know? I just got so frustrated with Windows that I have no intention of returning anytime soon. As bad as the frustrations I've come across in Linux so far, that almost all of them were brought on by me doing what the community said not to do, and then I did it, and then bad things happened. And that's not Linux's fault. That's not Manjaro or Arch's fault. That's me. I did something I shouldn't have done. But in Windows, it would be like I'm just doing my day-to-day business, and then, oh, it has to restart. Oh, it restarted. Everything is broken. Oh, I'm in a boot loop. Or, oh, my audio is just completely borked and nothing is working. And that happened like so regularly. It was a problem. But this has been great. You know? And it's teaching me a lot about how this stuff works. You know, like I'm learning a lot about Linux, how it actually operates. If I don't like my desktop environment, I switch to another one. I downloaded, like, I don't use the default system monitor, I use the GNOME system monitor because I like it. Should I use it on KDE? I don't know, but I like it. And it's what I use. I can download any piece of software directly from the repository, or the AUR, or the whatever, the snaps if I want to do that, or Flatpaks, and it just works, and it's generally safe. Because there's a community of people pouring through all this code to make sure it's safe. There are people vetting the software. Whereas on Windows, you don't know if that website is trusted or not. And the worst part is, it could be a trusted piece of software, like say WinRAR, but maybe it's on a non-trusted website that has modified it, like SourceForge or something, and now you install it and it installs 5 toolbars and an antivirus you didn't want. That doesn't really happen here. At least I haven't run into it. So, this has been my Linux progress report for week number 2. Came out a little later because I've been busy this week. But let me know what you think. I'm loving Linux, and I'm gonna stick around. See ya.